On the Capitol City.
She got.
So welcome everybody. We have what will probably be a fairly full hour and a half. I'm sure the program this evening you may have come with questions and it may generate a lot more questions, but we've got people here that can give you the answers. Hopefully. I'm Jim Darich, and I'm a part of the Safety and Firewise Committee. Kristen Can is one of our committee members. She's responsible for cookies and drinks and so forth this evening, but her primary job is coordinating the block contact program. And then we have Mike Can sitting over here. Mike is our database manager for all of our goings on. I'm the chair of the safety committee. Mayor Beth Graham is not here this evening. Oh, she's on. Okay. Her mom is here instead. Okay, but Mayor Beth works with the Firewise group to coordinate the debris boxes and the chipper program and that kind of thing. Sheila Johnson-Brusso is in the back with Chris, and Sheila is our liaison with the Southern Marin Neighborhood Response Group. And so she keeps us informed of what's going on with those guys, and we try to keep them informed of what we're doing. Julia Ogawa, where's Julia, is right there. She's the one that manufactures all of those green reflective address signs. You see 500 of them around the valley. She made them all. And then Steve Quarles. Exactly. Steve is the Firewise coordinator, and he keeps track of everything that needs to be kept track of for Firewise, and annually or semi-annually resubmits our application for recertification. It's an annual process. One important part of that, by the way, as you do work at your home, whether it's hardening your home or if you're doing fire fuel mitigation, if you're clearing away a green can of debris once a week, if you can keep track of that time, the amount of volunteer time and or expenses that you incur to do vegetation management around your home and or hardening of your home, and report that to Steve at the Firewise at hvfirewise.homestead or at hvfirewise@homestead. We'll have it in our emails. Anyway, if you keep track of that in some way, get that information to Steve by the end of the year, then we can use that. It's important data that we use for our recertification for the National Firewise program. Okay, so that's who we are. Whoops. I'm going to be one of your speakers this evening. I will be the shortest one. Going back, we have Kelby Jones, who will be introduced in just a moment, who has an extensive background in the insurance industry. And then Ivan O'Neill will be speaking about defensible space and designation programs. We'll all learn what that means. So what have we been up to this last year? The safety committee. I hope you all are aware now that twice a year at the time change weekend, there is some kind of organized activity related to safety safety. What we've done as a committee for the last couple of years is organize a local walkie-talkie drill. We have right now 12 operators scattered around the valley, and we all get on the air at 10:30 or so in the morning on that Sunday morning and do a check-in and have sometimes some mock drill activity, which then we relay from our command center here to Net Command, which is over at 1 Hamilton Drive. Net Command is taking information from all of Southern Marin County and would relay it then to the County Emergency Command Center, which is up in Terra Linda. So we go through that radio drill, and we found it to be very helpful. We've learned a lot. Each time we do it, we learn that there's a lot more that we need to learn, that we need to become more fluent with our radio operations, become more comfortable with our radio operations, learn where there are holes in our network because of reception and hills and trees and so forth getting in the way. So we're working out that kind of stuff. Another thing that we've been working on is recruiting CERT volunteers. Sheila has taken the point for that, and we need more. We 10 years ago, we had a fairly robust cadre of trained CERT volunteers in Homestead Valley. That group has dwindled and we need to replenish that. So keep your eyes open, watch our emails, look for indications as to how, if you have an interest in becoming a trained CERT volunteer, keep your eyes open and there'll be opportunities for you to participate in the training. Reflective address placards. It's been a slow year for us. We haven't given Julie a lot of work, but we have installed now close to 500 reflective address placards in the valley. There are 1,000 parcels in Homestead Valley, so we're approaching. Some of those are shared driveways, but so we're approaching 50% coverage of our homes, which is great. One of the most significant things that we embarked on and have been working with this past year, Chris took the lead on, is something we call our cluster organization. You may recall we have 59 blocks in Homestead Valley. A lot to manage, a lot of cats to herd. So what we have done is organize those blocks into clusters of anywhere from 6 to 10 or 11 blocks. And we have 7 or 8 clusters. What do we have? Because 7, 8 clusters. And we have a pilot program right now with 2 active clusters. And the idea there is that we have a cluster coordinator in each of those areas, and they work with their small subset of block contacts to enhance communication and participation. So that's what we've been up to. What we're going to continue to do is to build our walkie-talkie network, develop our radio skills, expand this volunteer base, doing a lot of the same thing moving forward. But shifting the focus for the last several years, our focus has really been on building our network of connectivity and communication within and throughout and amongst the residents here in the valley. Chris has done an amazing job of getting block contacts for all of our blocks. What we need to begin to focus on is implementing appropriate practices for an emergency situation. So what we're working on with our cluster coordinators is for them to organize their blocks and identify what kind of emergency equipment is available in their immediate neighborhood. What kind of supplies do they have there already, and what way might they want to put into place if there is a situation where there's a need to shelter in place. It's going to be much easier it may be more difficult for people to get down to the community center here. But if up at Amaranth, they have a cluster up there that might include Walsh Drive and Amaranth and that area up there, they may have an area that they could gather, have some supplies, have a communication center and so forth, and identify volunteers, might be medical volunteers, construction volunteers, et cetera. So that we're trying to decentralize that effort a little bit. That's what we're working on. Oh, I'm doing all right on time. All right. Yeah, I'm ahead of time. Any just quick question on anything I've said?
Is there any kind of a timetable established yet on the cluster? How do you call it? Cluster?
Don't go there.
Not going there. Cluster organization. I'm just curious.
Yes. Chris and I met, like I said, we have 2 pilot clusters in place right now. One around Vernal. I'm sorry. 3. Okay.
Yeah, we met with 2, and we have the cluster coordinator of the 3rd one here tonight.
Okay. So we've met with 2. What we're intending to do is help those cluster coordinators in January to organize a meeting of their cluster, all of the block the block contacts and the cluster coordinators here and talk with them about what the next steps would be. Okay, and we want to do that with all three of the clusters that we've identified. We're learning a lot just in the developing stages of that. And we hope then that we will be able to extend the clusters to all 8. But we need a cluster coordinator for the 5, each of the other 5. There was another question.
Can you explain what the role of a CERT volunteer might be?
In the CERT training, you'll get basic training in search and rescue techniques. You'll get basic training in community walkie-talkie communications. You'll get some basic first aid training. You'll get some crowd control training. You'll become familiar with typical protocols that the fire department and other emergency service organizations might use. It's a it used to be a 2 full day course. Now it's hybrid with about X number of hours, 10 to 15 hours online, and then a full day in-person training. Then when you get certified, it would be the local emergency service agency that activate you. All saying, we need certs to do such and such. And things like, would you be willing to direct traffic at Halloween on Sycamore Avenue? In emergency, in power outage situations, if they have a power line down, I was called a couple of times just to come and stand watch and ensure that to keep people away from the area. So it might be directing traffic, it might be controlling traffic. In the event of an emergency, our hope is volunteers would show up here because this will be our command center. And the incident commander here would give you directions. We need a crew to go up to Ameren. And because we've heard that there's something going on up there, we need to go up and check it out and then report back. Or we've got a dead zone over up at the end of North Burnville. And we have no communication there. We need to send a team up there, get information on what's going on in that area. That kind of help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Gotta go. Any other questions? Quick. Okay, great. Thank you all. So I'm going to turn it to Steve to do the introductions of our guests.
Thanks, and thanks for coming. We have 2 speakers tonight. Our focus tonight is insurance. So both speakers are talking about some aspect of insurance. I met the first speaker, Kelby Jones, a few months ago at a similar kind of Firewise meeting in Mill Valley. And this guy, Kelby, just knew a lot about insurance. I couldn't really quite figure out why. But I knew then that he was the guy to talk to about insurance. Turns out he spent his career in the insurance industry and did many things related to insurance, including he worked for commercial line insurers. I think that's neither here nor there for us. His responsibilities included underwriting, product management, product development, reinsurance management, and business strategy, among other things. And so he's going to talk to us about insurance in general and what happens should you become non-renewed and what your options are. So I think you'll find him pretty informative. He's a Marin resident and is active in his community. He's a Firewise leader, I think, in the Eichler Homes, the Lucas Valley. So he's a local guy. Our second speaker is Ivan O'Neill. I've known Ivan for a few years now. He is co-founder and CEO of Madronas Wildfire Defense. It's a company that does assessments of home and property, particularly related to wildfire. And he's very knowledgeable about this IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business Home Safety. I can't believe I can't say that. Wildfire Prepared Home Designation Program. So many of you have already been experienced this thing, the wildfire prepared home designation program, and those of you that haven't, I think many of us will, because it's something that the insurance industry tends to like. And so Ivan to talk to us about that. And I think you'll find his talk pretty informative also. Interestingly, Ivan is a certified wildfire mitigation specialist. So that's sort of a thing that the National Fire Protection Association has. It's quite an honor to be that. And he's a wildland fire type 2 certification. He has that kind of certification. So if we need someone to come, to help us with a wildfire, I'm calling Ivan. So anyway, he's our second speaker, and they'll be happy to answer your questions. This meeting is being recorded.
Correct.
And so you can watch it again if you're so inclined. So we'll start now. So Kelby, please come forward and wow.
As Kelby is moving forward, just to remind you all here, but our people that are on Zoom, if you're at home watching on Zoom, send your questions in on chat. Mike is monitoring the chat through the meeting, and when we get to Q&A, Mike will relay your questions to the appropriate speaker. So,
Very good. Thank you, Jim.
you're welcome.
It's great to see such a group of people interested in emergency preparedness. That's wonderful. I wish I had this turnout at my last meeting in my homeowners association, which is actually about half the size of yours. However, we do have a crisis in insurance, and it's not just California. The cost of weather-related disasters have contributed to unprofitable results for homeowners insurance in 6 out of the last 7 years. As a matter of fact, 2023 insurers had a net combined ratio of 110.5%, the worst result since 2011. That means that they paid out $1.10 for every dollar they took in. So their loss costs and expenses were that much more than what they took in. That's not exactly sustainable from a profit-making company's perspective, and consequently, you see a lot of disruption in the market. A lot of the contributors to that have to do with a very rapid rise in inflation, which none of us quite expected, but it certainly did occur. 38% since 2019, and just the construction industry alone. That's a lot of money in a short period of time. The other things that have occurred and the large disasters that we've experienced have been what we call demand surge. So when you have a loss to your home, there's costs to repair it, but when there are losses to a lot of homes at one time, the cost simply goes up because that's supply and demand. And as a result, demand surge is another factor that has been a significant element in how insurers have reacted to what we see as disaster response. And then finally, because all of this has occurred in a fairly short period of time, the rate process of adjusting insurance costs to what insurers actually can get in the way of premiums has not kept up. So rapid rise in inflation, rate requests for increases to keep track always seem to lag. And so that's another factor contributing to the crisis. And the fact that we're having more of these disasters is a significant factor. 2023 was a record year. There were 28 weather-related events that cost $1 billion or more. That was a record. Year to date through October 2024, we had 24 such events that have cost over $60 billion and over 400 lives. And of course, we know that November was not exactly a passive month. So the tally for 2024 is still undetermined, but it is not slowed down. So what about California specifically? We don't have all of the various storms that occur, although we have just about every disaster that occurs in the country here in the States somewhere almost every year. Our major risk in California has been wildfire. Well, in our state, 85% of the homeowners insurance coverage has been provided by a dozen large admitted insurers, household names that you see on the commercials day in, day out. Well, out of those dozen insurers, over half have paused writing new business and or are selectively non-renewing policies. Why? Well, there are several reasons for that. One is, in many cases, it's just a matter of too many policies, too much value in one geographic area. Now, that may be because companies weren't paying as much attention to their concentration of risk as they should have, but it also may be that they weren't able to renew or obtain enough reinsurance. Reinsurance is insurance for insurance companies to protect their aggregate risk in a particular geographic area. So too many policies or too much concentration of value is one factor. Another is the price regulation that we talked about is not keeping it. So getting your rate to match your exposure has a lag in it. And that is certainly a profitability concern. And then finally, insurance companies are paying a lot more attention to what it really takes to manage wildfire risk in the state. And they're turning to what we call risk scoring models. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot more of that from Ivan later. But bottom line is they are developing new eligibility standards for their homeowners insurance protection. And those risk standards are revealing characteristics that were previously unrecognized. So if your homeowners insurer is asking you about things they never asked about before, there are reasons for that. And it's the evolving nature of the wildfire risk and the climate risk in our area. My PowerPoint capabilities are obviously.
We can do it.
California's insurance regulation is like 30 years old. Well out of date. Hasn't been updated in a long time. There are pros and cons to that. Currently, our regulation requires prior approval of any rate change for an insurer, and it also requires a public input to that process. It's called the consumer intervener process. There's an organization called Consumer Watchdog that exists for the sole purpose of opposing consumer insurance rate increases, which of course adds time and expense to the rate review process. It's unique to California, not totally unique to the world, but it's one of the holdovers from Prop 103. We also have a politically oriented commercial California Department of Insurance. It's an elected insurance commissioner. Frankly, it's generally not too popular to raise insurance rates with voters. Consequently, there's a little bit of hesitation there to allow rates to keep up with costs. And California is the last state, the only state that does not allow insurers to use modern technology in the form of catastrophe modeling to justify their rate increases and look at future costs. The net result is insurers in many cases, they view their rates currently today as inadequate, and that's why you see them not wanting to take on any more policies and why they're looking to non-renew some of their existing book of business. Jim? So California's cost of insurance has been well below the national average for many years. Now, this is a set of comparisons that is based on a $300,000 homeowners insurance limit, just a fraction of the value of your homes in Mill Valley. However, on an average cost basis, this is very useful for a state-by-state comparison. And California has been about a third below the national average for a long time. If you looked at other states, Illinois, for example, is about an average state. Texas, about 2/3 more. Florida, with the very high catastrophe costs, about 2.5 times the national average. So this is just a benchmark. So what do insurers want? What would keep them from bailing out on California homeowners? Well, certainly they want faster review and approval of their rate requests. Second, they would like objective risk mitigation standards. Currently, the Department of Insurance requires that there be specific discounts for a number of things that are not statistically proven. And unfortunately, one of those happens to be if you live in a Firewise community, you get to have a discount. Not a lot, but you get some. But we don't have any statistical basis for that benefit yet. So that's an example of where insurers would like to see some statistically relevant basis for the rate structure that they're required to put in place. Another is, of course, their catastrophe modeling. They'd like to be able to use their models to project their future losses and incorporate that in their rate making. And then finally, they would like to be able to pass their cost of reinsurance on to their policyholders. Reinsurance is basically a tool to manage volatility in insurance costs. It's not about making money. It's about managing or smoothing out those very high peaks when you have a disastrous wildfire season. Reinsurance basically spreads that over a number of years. Well, that is a cost of doing business, and right now California does not allow that cost to be put into the rates. So that's one of the other concerns insurers have. Jim?
Did I skip one?
So what is catastrophe modeling anyway? We talked about risk modeling briefly before, but catastrophe modeling is quite different. Think about the 2017 Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa. That was a repeat of the 1964 Hamlet fire. Same footprint in Santa Rosa. Well, that was a repeat of the Great Fire of 1870. So you've got a succession of fires that burned in the same areas. In each case, dramatically more value, dramatically more in terms of numbers of homes insured and burned in those fires. Well, what catastrophe modeling does is take the aggregate in a lot of different data sets, combines those things to produce a probabilistic model that says, well, here is a range of outcomes and their likelihood of occurring. So that's what a catastrophe model does. It takes an overall cost of a wildfire event, models different scenarios. It doesn't give you just one answer, it gives you a range, so it could be from here to here. Well, that's what insurers have used for many years. They use in all other states. That's also what reinsurers, of course, use, and then charge insurers based on their catastrophe modeling. Well, that's not allowed in California yet. Okay. So what is the California Department of Insurance have in the way of plans for fixing this California insurance crisis? Unfortunately, it'll be too little too late for many, many policyholders. Commissioner Lara's sustainable insurance strategy intends to do these three things: streamline rate reviews. Unfortunately, the plan begins with holding everybody accountable to the existing standards that have been there for 30 years in Prop 103. I'm not sure behavior is going to change that dramatically, but that's one part of their plan. The second is to have insurers use a new data reconciliation tool, but CDI hasn't finished that yet. So we're not sure exactly what that's going to look like, if it's going to cost more time, expense, whatever. But that's step one. Step two, allow catastrophe modeling. However, to do that, insurers are going to have to write at least 85% of their market share in those distressed areas, meaning whatever CDI defines as high wildfire risk. And as a result, it's like well, if you want to use your catastrophe modeling tool, you're going to have to make sure that you're putting a lot of resource into high wildfire risk areas. So whether insurers choose to take advantage of using their CAT models with that requirement is a question mark. Do not know how that will turn out yet. And of course, CDI will want to approve all of those models as they're filed with the insurance department. And then finally, they will consider the cost of reinsurance based on just this a few weeks ago announced that they're going to begin a process to consider including the net cost of California only reinsurance in rates. To do that, insurers will again have to commit to more policies in high wildfire risk areas. But in any case, it's a step forward in the right direction. Simply because it is a cost of doing business and they don't have the ability to reflect it in their rates today. So progress, yes, but it will take a while. All of these changes in regulation would take effect sometime, hopefully early in 2025. However, the actual implementation of those things will occur throughout the course of next year and into the following year at least. So we're not looking at any quick fixes. We're not looking at any absolute guaranteed panacea for the problem we have today. Jim? So what do you do if you are canceled or non-renewed? Anybody here have that experience yet? My condolences. So first order of business is don't panic. There is an alternative out there, but you need to start shopping right away because it can take you a fair amount of time and effort to replace what you've had in the past. At the same time you're shopping, you want to appeal your decision. Go back to your insurer who's canceled and non-renewed you. Ask them specifically, what would it do? What would it take to change your mind? How can I keep my insurance with you? Be sure to ask for absolute specifics for the basis of their decision for canceling or non-renewing your policy. Make sure that there's a clear relationship between that and your actual home. In many cases, the decision to non-renew or cancel is based on information that actually is inaccurate. Insurance companies are using the tools they have available. They're looking desperately for ways to make better decisions, better risk management decisions for their overall book. So some things they're doing, they can easily look at satellite imagery. So you get a picture of your roof. I've had a number of neighbors that have had their insurance canceled and non-renewed because insurer said, well, you have a deteriorated looking roof. Well, so we'll go back and say, well, what exactly is the claim that you're trying to avoid here? You won't pay for any water damage because I have an old leaky roof. So what is it that's actually a concern? So in other words, pushback, get the specifics as to exactly what that decision is based on. And you'll often find that they will change their mind because they don't have a good and valid basis for their decision. Simply well, deteriorated roof means maybe the rest of the home is not in such great condition. Well, that theory of connection isn't a valid basis for non-renewing your policy. So push back, get the specifics. Question?
Is there any recourse, or why would they even listen or take the argument?
Yes, there are. Well, we'll kind of get to that in a little more detail, but basically, your insurance with one of those dozen large admitted insurance carriers. They are regulated by the California Department of Insurance. You have an appeal process available to you, a complaint process that is available to you, and consequently, yes, there are some recourses. Is that a guarantee? Sorry, no, but it certainly is a path forward to trying to get back what you thought you had. And that is part of the issue here is there are a couple of places to do that.
Yes. Would you prefer questions at the end or as topics come up? Because I have a question on this topic.
If you have a burning question, let's ask it now. And if I want to defer it, I'll have that, turn that off.
You tell me to shut up as needed. So my question is, when you say it's not a valid reason for non-renewal, so are you saying valid in terms of the insurance commissioner might look at it, or are you saying valid in terms of their own, in terms of the underwriter's logic? That makes
Actually,
sense.
the answer is both. If
Okay.
you push back on their decision and they don't have a valid basis for that decision, in other words, they can't explain exactly what their decision relates to in terms of your loss exposure, it's not really a valid issue.
Well, I have one of those deteriorated roof
Uh,
things. Okay, and it's a flat roof.
Yeah.
And there's pooling, they say, although that's what the aerial photograph did. Well,
because that's what they can see, right?
well, they could not see that when the aerial flyover was in October and there's been no rain all summer. So I don't know how they can say it's pooling.
Oh, they probably saw a stain. you know.
Well, what they saw, okay, but Adam.
The point is that they react in many cases on what they actually have available as tools. And those tools don't always give an answer that is related to your actual risk. So push back on what is the relationship between what you saw and the risk that you would actually pay for.
Right, because they're not going to insure for resultant damage from a deteriorated roof. They're
Well,
not
like
going
I
to pay.
say, they're not gonna pay for your water leaks.
Right, so what?
So that's,
Shut up, man.
you can push back.
I
on
will,
insurance.
I am.
That's one direction, but you can also get help from the California Department of Insurance. Because if you have an issue, again, if you have an admitted insurer,
I do.
then they are regulated by CDI and CDI will respond. They will look at that complaint. They will look at the details of the circumstances and they will push back on that insurer on your behalf if that's appropriate.
And would you recommend that be done,
While you're shopping for other insurance at the same time, absolutely.
got it, thank
Yeah, so again, don't panic, start shopping, appeal, and then get help. CDI is one resource. The other is United Policyholders. It's a nonprofit organization that exists for the sole purpose of helping people with insurance problems. So while you're shopping, you wanna, I'm reluctant to say this, but you wanna be sure you're educated on what your insurance is. I know that's not the most fun you've ever had in the world, but, it really is important. You wanna absolutely make sure that you're insuring your home for replacement cost value, not the depreciated actual cash value you might get from some offers. Unfortunately, that cost is north of $600 a square foot, Marin, and, that doesn't reflect necessarily the cost of inflation over the past few years. You need to look at what your actual costs to rebuild would be. And you also need to think about what is it today, but then what's it going to be at the end of your policy term 12 months from now? So think about inflation, which is not stopping. I mean, it's slowing down, but it's not stopping. So when you set your limits, think about the end of the year, not the beginning. And also consider the fact that demand surge does have an impact. So if you were the victim of one of many victims in a wildfire event, demand surge could drive that up even higher than rebuild costs are that you're going to get from a contractor today. Okay, so think about value. You should also absolutely have building code upgrade coverage. Unless your home is new or recently and extensively remodeled, you need building code upgrade coverage. Because you cannot build the same house the same way today. That's the way it was put together in the first place. Consequently, if you don't have that coverage, it's not gonna pay. I mean, you couldn't replace plain plate glass indoors and over areas like this without double pane or tempered glass. Well, that costs more than plain plate, right? So you've got to have the coverage to reflect that additional cost, which is not in the replacement cost, by the way. Your replacement cost value is replacing it with the existing materials. But if the building code won't let you do that, you've got to buy coverage to make sure that you are able to replace appropriately. And I'm sorry, one more thing, the covered cause of loss, there are a couple of different policy forms. You generally want to think about HO3, which is a special form. It used to be called all risks. Basically, in that case, it's the onus is on the insurance company to prove that the loss was not covered by the policy. If you get a HO2 form, which is a named perils form, the onus is on you to prove that the loss was caused by a covered cause of loss. So there are those kinds of nuances, but most of the time you're looking at any insurance agent worth their salt for you, and it's going to give you an HO3 quote to begin with. So just think about those things. And you had a question.
Quickly, the building code upgrade, is that hidden? I've never seen that broken out as a specific thing.
It's a separate endorsement. Some companies call it ordinance and law coverage. Some call it building code upgrade.
It wouldn't be hidden under just the replacement cost, so.
No, it's a separate endorsement. It will have a separate limit for, an HO3 or an HO2. Those are standard industry coverage forms. So to add to that, you need a specific additional endorsement, and that's what building code upgrade coverage would be, one of those things. Just like if you bought water damage coverage to prevent sewer or to pay for sewer and drain backup, that's an additional endorsement. Doesn't come under your replacement cost value. Okay. So choosing an insurer, there are a lot of different factors to consider here. It boils down to three choices. The admitted insurers are the ones who are licensed and regulated by the California Department of Insurance. They are the ones that provide 85% of the homeowners coverage in California. However, that pool is shrinking in terms of availability for new policies. Their rates and forms are relatively predictable and standard. They're audited by CDI, so financially they're relatively secure. But if you're not able to find those, your second choice should be the non-admitted market, what also called the surplus line market. Now, these are companies that are not licensed and regulated by CDI. However, they are licensed and regulated by one of our 50 states in the United States. So they are looked at somewhere by somebody. They are simply not licensed and regulated by our insurance department here in California. Okay. And as a result, their rates and their forms are what they choose to use, as opposed to what they have to file and have approved by California's Department of Insurance. Okay. Consequently, their costs and the terms, meaning the coverage forms, they are negotiable. But they can be as good as, if not better than, what you can get in the admitted market. It's just a matter of, in other words, to sum it up, the surplus line market or non-admitted market is not bad in itself. It simply requires a little more expertise to negotiate. Okay. And you'll probably pay a bit more because they are not constrained by the risk, the rate limitations that exist for the admitted insurers. The third choice, and this is what you definitely don't want to be end up in, is the fair plan. Think about assigned risk automobile insurance, right, for minimal limits, like the lowest you can possibly get away with. That's the California fair plan. It's intended to be the market of last resort for basic fire insurance coverage. You do not want to go there. If you have to buy a fair plan policy, you're also going to want to buy a supplemental policy from another insurer. It's called difference in conditions coverage. And that makes up for the gap that the fair plan does not provide. The fair plan only gives you named perils of coverage, fire, lightning, for example. You get no theft, you get no water damage. Of course, there's no liability. So you've got a lot of gap to make up, and that's what a difference in conditions policy does. But of course, that costs a lot more. In addition to your fair plan policy, which is already quite expensive, Jim. So how do you access all of these three choices, these different insurers? The different channels, and many companies use different ones, not just one, they'll use several. But if you look at direct coverage, you can, you see advertisements from Progressive or CSAA all the time. They sell direct to you. Captive agents like State Farm, Allstate, the agent really only has one company that they'll place you with, right? So that's what a captive agent represents. Independent agents, they represent multiple insurers. Typically, they may only represent a handful. Others, larger brokers, represent many. And then brokers that really represent you and only you will typically have access to many different companies in a variety of channels, and they will also access the surplus line market, which has to be accessed through a surplus line broker. It's not all that complicated, it's just the way the world works. Surplus line brokers are what we term wholesalers, so not every retail agent has a relationship with a wholesaler. Many do, but many, and the vast majority, do not. And consequently, if you have a representative who only represents one carrier, or who doesn't normally access the surplus line market, you should consider, if you need to be shopping, you should consider talking to an independent agent or broker who does access the surplus line market and has access to multiple homeowners insurance companies. There are over 100 licensed, meaning admitted, homeowners insurance companies in California, but most retail agents only have a few, just a handful. So think about how you're accessing those different markets. And I can also tell you that in many cases, insurers limit the amount of business they'll accept from specific insurance agents, especially if those insurance agents have not produced profitable business for them. And consequently, if you have an agent in your local area, sounds like they know what's going on here, they may not have access to new business for certain insurers because they've been cut off. Well, maybe you want to look at an East Bay agent who doesn't have those same restrictions in your geography. So there's a lot of patchwork going on in terms of how you access, but my point to you is look for somebody with some breadth of access to different channels, getting to these various types of insurers, and then think not just about your local area, but think beyond that, because that's maybe what you need if you have to go shopping and you're running into nothing but dead ends here. Jim. So how do you get help? Well, the independent agents and brokers in California have a member lookup by zip code. The Surplus Line Association of California has a surplus line broker lookup, but also you can find that same kind of information on the California Department of Insurance website. And if you choose their consumer tab, you'll get access to lists of insurers, lists of independent agents, lists of surplus line brokers and surplus line carriers. So I'm not going to suggest it's necessarily all as up to date as the other two resources there, but you can get an awful lot in that section of the site. If you choose this particular tab, the Home Residential Insurance tab from the consumer link, this is what you get, and it includes a lot of information. You get tips for finding residential insurance. You can compare premiums. You can have a coverage comparison tool if you want to look at specifics. You also have this home insurance finder, which is a really very helpful item. It can show you not only the insurance companies providing homeowners insurance in your specific zip code, but also the licensed agents that represent those companies. So there's a lot of good information available right on that page. And I should mention also there's a complaint item on the CDI website. In that last slide, there's a button for that too. But you can also check the ratings, complaint ratings for the National Insurance Association of Insurance Commissioners. They have a national website for both admitted and non-admitted insurers that lists complaints. And you or your insurance representative should be looking at the financial stability of whatever insurer you're considering, whether it's admitted or non-admitted. And Best and Demotech are two resources for that. Jim. Again, last point on the fair plan, your last resort, they won't cover all of the value of your home necessarily. They've got a $3 million cap on their limits. The coverage is very limited. You're going to have to get some additional coverage, difference in conditions. So they are an important safety net. If you fall through everything else, you still have that option. And try to make it your last option. And if you have a representative that sends you straight to the fair plan, find another representative. Jim. So what's the future look like? Well, it's pretty obvious that insurance is going to be more difficult and expensive to obtain, at least for a while. Homeowners are going to be required to do more in the way of home hardening and defensible space. And the legislation and the regulations that are currently proposed and or passed are going to either help or in some cases hinder the process of getting us into a better insurance environment. It's an evolving process. Again, some of what CDI has done will create some bumps in the road. Ultimately, hopefully it will be a better thing for us. But the bottom line is it will take time and we're going to have to live with some disruption. However, they will be back. All of those insurance companies will be back to the largest homeowners insurance market in the country. Just a matter of time and at what cost to you and I. You had a question?
Yeah, just, I had read that the FAIR plan was oversubscribed already, that there are doubts that if there are major.
I was trying not to be a total down. The FAIR plan has been absolutely overwhelmed with, in part inappropriately because lazy agents are sending people directly there.
Mhm.
Not a good thing. I mean, to access the surplus lines market, the non-admitted market, you're required to have 3 rejections from the admitted carriers. The FAIR plan is supposed to have rejections from both the admitted and non-admitted market.
Mm.
That's not happening.
Oh.
Agents are sending people directly to the FAIR plan. They're overwhelmed in terms of applications. And the net result is not only it's been a service disruption, but
I want to mute all.
I didn't really want to say this, but frankly, it's not a good thing to have
Yeah.
with so little financial backing, because quite frankly, the FAIR plan is well undercapitalized.
Yeah.
And so I'm a Debbie Downer now, sorry.
No, it's just reinforcing the point that you made, that go to every other option before you.
Oh, to be fine, I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
can we just hold that till later,
Oh, sure.
if that's okay?
I'm done.
Thank you so much. There'll be time at the end for more questions, but we need to give a fair shot to Ivan. So Ivan, come on up. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you to Kelby for setting the table for us. I think it's going to be a nice transition and a good warm up for what we're going to talk about here, which is what else are insurers looking for and what else can we do to deal with this kind of environment that we're living in right now. So real quick about me, I lived in the road in Santa Rosa. I used to live in San Francisco. Before that, I was in LA, grew up in Washington State. So I guess I'm a West Coast native. Steve talked a little bit about some of the credentials I have. I'm not a wildland firefighter. I like to do prescribed burns, and they let me hold the torch, but that's really about it. And in a past life, I worked in the consumer technology space, so smart grid, smart home, and I'm bringing some of that background with me. And I'm also serving on the board of directors for a fire safe group in Western Sonoma County. So, and I have the privilege to lead the Madronas team here. And on our next slide, you know, we're here as a company because and I'm sure many of you are here too, because we're tired of seeing, you know, images like this one here. And unfortunately, with climate change, science suggests that we're going to see about 1 out of every 5 homes in the United States involved in a wildfire footprint in the next 30 years. So climate risks are driving a lot of what we're doing, but there's also a range of other factors about where we're building homes, the ways that we manage the forests and the wildlands around us, and all of that's kind of coming to a confluence here. And to put this in a little bit of perspective, I don't think many of us have been through a wildfire, fortunately, but this is an image that way. Sure. Sorry. So this is what a bad day looks like, and you know, this is broad daylight. You wouldn't know it from the image, but there are millions of these tiny little embers floating around. Each one that is larger than 1/8 of an inch has the ability to ignite something next to our homes. And then that is what ultimately can lead to the overwhelming of the fire agencies and our first responders that then gets into the community. And then we have a house-to-house spread problem. And that's really what is driving a lot of the losses that we've seen in the last 6 years from wildfires. And of course, as Kelby mentioned, all of this comes home when we're trying to get insurance for our homes, for our businesses. And it's so bad that not even CAL FIRE can get insurance for some of the stations that they're trying to build and remodel, right? So that's how bad it's getting. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this. I think Kelby described, some of the factors that are going in, but I think this graph does a nice job of illustrating the things he was talking about, where insurers say, look, our costs to rebuild have gone up, the cost of doing business have gone up. Reinsurance costs are not factored into our rates. And of course, we have a backdrop of more and more natural catastrophes that are driving losses. And so under the rates and under Prop 103, if you had a policy that in 2010 was at $2,000, let's just say for the sake of argument, and at the 7% annual increase that Prop 103 allows, in 2023, that would be about $4,800 maximum. But that assumes that the insurance department is reviewing and approving rates on a normal basis. Well, sometimes those have gone 2 years before rate cycles, and so then they get behind. And in the meantime, we've seen the climate losses grow. We've seen in 2020, when insurance rates spiked, then that's the cost of reinsurance, right? This is a global market of capital that provides the reinsurance capacity to insurers. And when interest rates go to 5%, all we have to do is buy a government bond to get that rate of return. If an insurer says, you know what, I've got this opportunity, would you like to buy our risk? They say, sure, maybe for 10% or 15%, right? There's real risk there. So that policy in 2010 that was $2,000 actuarially would be somewhere closer to $7,700. And the maximum that the state would allow them to charge would be $4,800. And I would say the realistic rate that most insurers are at is somewhere around $3,000. So you can see where we start to see this gap. And there's always this pressure between, can we afford the insurance and is it even available to us, right? And that's really, I think, what Kelby was describing in his presentation and what's causing our issues here. So we talked about admitted insurers. Anybody see their insurer on the list? State Farm, of course, they're really stepping back. They've non-renewed 72,000 policies this year. They've been making noises that they're going to shrink their overall business in California by 30%, so about 1 million policies. They are currently the largest insurer in the state. So more pain to come. I think they're doing some political posturing with stories, but regardless, they're trying to shoot across the bow. Farmers, they've been one of the most aggressive about non-renewing. They're starting to shift and come back into the market. They continue to write, but only generally newer homes, and they have some pretty strict criteria. So when it comes to what they're mostly doing, we're seeing them require that wildfire prepared home certificate. They're giving people about 130 days notice. And then if you want to renew the policy, you've got to provide that certificate. CSAA, AAA here, they're also starting to require that wildfire prepared home certificate. They're not giving quite as much notice, somewhere between 60 and 90 days. I think hopefully they'll start to give people a little bit more heads up, and because that's really only fair. Allstate is completely out of the market right now. They're not really non-renewing people, but sometimes they'll come out and they'll say, hey, you've got to replace your brand new deck with, Trex, or you've got to enclose your eaves and redo your vents. So we've seen their recommendations or requirements kind of all over the map, but not quite sure what's going on there. Progressive and Mercury, they're requiring mostly defensible space photos. So they'd like you to reduce the vegetation, maybe that non-combustible zone 0, and then you send in photos and most folks get renewed.
Add Safeco to your list.
Safeco, they're a travelers company, and
Okay.
they've started to get out of California entirely, from what I understood.
I
But
thought they were Liberty Mutual, but
I think you're right. You're right. That's not one we've heard. I'd love to hear kind of what your experiences afterward. Next slide,
Oh,
please.
sorry. Oops.
All right. So Steve mentioned the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. What do? They are the research scientists that do the buildings, what the crash test dummies and smashing cars up do on the automotive industry side. So this is their facility in South Carolina. They've got this farm of roofs that they've been aging in the South Carolina heat and humidity. They're going to see which shingles work and which ones don't. This building here is really impressive. That's a wall of fans that can generate 130-mile-an-hour winds. These folks get to build buildings, bombard them with all kinds of stuff, hail, wind, water, and of course, wildfire. And some of the experiments that they run there when it comes to wildfire are ones like this. So this is on the inside of that chamber. The wall of fans is on the right side. And this long exposure photo, I think, does a great job. They have a life-size structure here, and the heat, the high heat parts here show what happens to a home in a wildfire. Those embers are going through and they're collecting at the base of the wall, and then you can see how they kind of swirl outward. And they're doing this eddy current all the way around the building. And this is what is leading to some of the recommendations that are in the wildfire prepared home requirement, and why we're hearing about things like, oh, we need a non-combustible zone within 5 feet of our house. Next slide, please. And anybody here go to Ember Stomp?
Yeah.
Yeah, this last year they did one of these side-by-side burns, very dramatic. We all know how it ends, right? But the science is, it's a very powerful demo. It shows like what traditional construction, how it gets affected in a wildfire with just a tiny little bit of spark to get going. And if there's no firefighters to put it out, which is often what happens in these big extreme weather events, then quickly the home is consumed.
I would just say at Ember Stomp, it was 20 minutes and the building on the left was gone.
Yeah. Got the marshmallows out.
Yeah.
Made it fun. And so this wildfire prepared home standard that we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail in just a moment, but it's the only insurer recognized science-based standard for mitigating wildfire risk. It's recognized by 70% of insurers in California, including all those big logos there on the right. And let's talk a little bit about what it is. So there are 2 tiers. There's the base level, which is really the only thing any of us in this room need to worry about. If you have an existing home, don't even worry about the plus unless you're trying to build from scratch. But it's really designed to mitigate those ember risks that start the fire entering into a community. If you get certified, it's valid for 3 years. They require an annual defensible space check, so you just send in photos there, and then there's a full reinspection on the 3rd anniversary. The one nice thing about this, if we're thinking about selling a home in the next 3 to 5 years, this certificate's transferable. So you can give it to your buyer and they can go shop for insurance with that certificate. There's none of the other things that the Department of Insurance is working on meets those requirements. And so there's 2 options for how to get this certificate. They have a self-service or a do-it-yourself option. So you can go on the website, they have a homeowner guide, there's checklists and resources. You can download those, review them, find a contractor, do the work yourself. When you think you're ready, you pay $125, send in some photos, and then they send out an inspector. And that inspector will take some photos, it'll go in and get reviewed, and then if there's anything that doesn't work, then you kind of go back to the beginning. If there's a few small things, I'll let you take photos and send those in, but otherwise you're paying for a brand new inspection at the end. Since July, there's a new full service option, and that is actually my company. So Madrona's statewide in California, we are the full service provider for this program. And the way that we differ is that we set folks up with a consultation up front. So before folks start spending any money with a contractor, you know exactly what would be required in your home. We give you a digital treatment plan that shows exactly what would need to be done, and then a vetted contractor network that's available to do the work. And then we can come back to that final inspection and make sure that you go through the process smoothly. And so far, we've got about 5 times better success rate than folks who try to go through the program, on their own. It can get really technical really quickly, especially if we're not, a standard suburban house, on a, quarter acre or half acre, excuse me, eighth acre lot. So this is what the treatment plan looks like. If you've ever gotten a defensible space inspection from the local fire service, it looks very similar to that. And you can track your progress. And moving along, we have 2 different options for consultations. So we do remote ones where you take a video and we'll do a Zoom and we'll give you a basic version of the report. And then if you'd like an in-person, we'll send a specialist out. You get 2.5 hours. They'll make a comprehensive plan that's ready for quoting. And then the final inspection is $399. If you do that in-person consultation, you get $100 off. So that's the spiel. Happy to answer all kinds of questions during the official Q&A, or I'll be hanging around afterward. But really, this is what we want to see, right? If we're all groups like us here gathered, all caring about our community, caring about our homes, if we do the right thing, this community down in Chile survived a wildfire burning on all 3 sides back in February, and not a single home was lost. So this can work, and look forward to any questions and seeing some success stories in the future.
In terms of that photo, I mean, was that a designed and planned community for that purpose? Or was it
Not
coincidental?
Wildfire. This community is about 12 years old. I had the opportunity to go down in April with a delegation, and we interviewed and learned what happened. And really, it was a group of concerned citizens that got together, got a grant. They did a lot of clearance along here and downslope a little bit. So the rest of the community, though, was sort of flat and had already been, bulldozed basically. And they had a single way in or out. And about 50% of the homes up here were destroyed. They lost 9,800 homes. But this group, thanks to the mitigations that they had done, thanks to some quick evacuation, and then what residents did when they returned, they went around and put out spot fires. There was 0 fire response. And it was a great success story. Yes, sir.
Going back to that photo there, were any of the homes in there, had they all been inspected, met new standards for fire hardening?
I have a white paper, a report that's coming out, and a video that goes into that. But the short answer is not all the way. We assessed them. How do they track to the wildfire prepared home standard? They did a lot of things that are very similar. So not a lot of vegetation right next to the house. You can see there's a lot of concrete, and they had concrete walls in between. And relatively small lot sizes. All the homes were stucco. So right next to the ground, there's nothing really to ignite on the homes. And then they all had good, well-maintained roofs, very minimal vents. There's basically one on this corner and one on that corner, and that was about it. And I love trees. I grew up in Washington State, but you can count them. There's like probably 12, 15 in this entire community. So there wasn't a lot of overstory vegetation, nor is there a lot of space in between for a lot of vegetation. So people had potted plants, but not a lot of stuff in the ground.
So my actual question, that was my preliminary one. This community is in the middle of a giant forest.
Sure.
So and I'm not trying to be, but can you get homes in this area certified without having to cut down prize trees, which is kind of, there's a murder charge that is put on people who cut down their neighbors' beautiful trees. How does that work, just briefly?
That's a question that requires some beer or wine.
Well, I know it's big, but
It has to be, right?
yeah.
So there's this combination of it's 2 knobs that we're fiddling with on the control board. We can turn down the exposures that our homes and communities face, and we can turn up the armor that we have on our homes so that if and when more homes don't start, firefighters have an opportunity to get on the ones that do, and we avoid that house to house, overwhelming urban conflagration. And in terms of, vegetation, there's we see plenty of examples of forest that is well maintained and fire can travel through at a low to moderate severity, and we can keep it back from the hillsides. This was pretty much unmatched, right? It's really these first 30 feet to 100 feet, maybe 50 feet right next to the community. That's the ones that we're going to have to focus on. And I think the last thing I'll say is prescribed fire, controlled fire, burning when we want to, rather than when Mother Nature decides to. So we consume, excuse me, that small fuel, the easy stuff. That's what the ecology of our area evolved with native land management. And so we have to start to get back to a phase where every 5 years or so, we burn off the understory. And then when the fire does arrive, there's just not a whole lot to carry. It's going to stay close to the ground. And
But doesn't the base requirement say no overhanging branches?
It does.
So from a practical perspective, there are homes in Marin, communities in Marin that will never have the base designation as long as those trees stay put.
Or as long as the standard requires it.
Well, true enough.
But the standards not required. I mean, that's one of the main clauses, isn't it? Getting the fire gets in the canopy and goes through the town.
There's ways that you can prevent the fire from getting up into the treetops to keep it on the ground. That's job number one. And then the second one is, every living plant, even if it's a low risk succulent or, I don't know, every plant generates leaves and needles and dead branches, and those just get blown around. And anytime they meet a workable surface, they're going to build up at the base, and that's what then the embers find, right? And so we're trying to reduce the exposure. I don't have a great answer right now for the overhanging trees within 5 feet or even over the house. That's why a lot of us bought the homes that we live in, right? And I'm hopeful that the science eventually shows a way that it's possible to have those qualities and still be fire safe, but it might require that we do different things with our decks, or that we have different siding right next to the ground. So those are, unfortunately, we can't run experiments in our line of work. It's not very ethical, but as we start to see these types of certified homes that are then exposed to a wildfire, we'll start to see what features or characteristics predict survival.
Okay, and just my last follow-up with what you do though can be done in Mill Valley with given the situation still. I mean, homes can be hardened and certified here.
100%. We've been fortunate to be involved with a number of homes in Mill Valley and Marin County broadly that have been certified. I would say even if you do have overhanging vegetation, trees, do the other stuff. Leave the big ones, but take care of the rest of it. Start to look at the standard and say, if I'm going to plan, my maintenance, my upkeep on my home, here's some things that I'm going to start to do now, even if I'm going to go ahead and leave the trees, because you can have an impact. It's an accumulation and a system of things, and maybe leave the tree for last. That, let's hope that things start to evolve and we learn, and those are viewed as less of a risk with time.
The thing about the trees, though, they drop debris, and so the things you might do that are part of the designation program will mitigate to some degree the needle drop or the leaf drop, because it's not accumulating in others. You're protecting the side of the house from ember emissions from that debris, because you protected the base of the wall, which is a requirement.
Yeah. Exactly.
I recently had an inspection that covered a lot of these different factors, and I'm suddenly not clear who sponsored the inspection. I think it was some county, or maybe it was the state.
Southern Marin Fire District, I think. Southern Marin Fire District.
How does it was a two-part inspection, and they noticed a number of factors, and there was some I was required to fix, and some that were just suggested, and they all seemed to make good sense to me, and I took care of them. And I wonder how that inspection relates to this.
Asking all the hard questions. So we're in a three-way standoff between insurance companies, local agencies, building code officials, and politicians, really. Nobody wants this hot potato. And one of the biggest challenges is that there's so much competing information. Some of it quite a bit overlaps, but there's a agreement broadly that we need to align. But then politically, it's very difficult to do things like tell people that they have to cut down all the trees that might be overhanging their home. So the ways that the inspection that the fire agencies typically conduct, they focus on what's in the codes and the regulations, and those just tend to lag the science by 5 to 10 years in many cases. And they represent certain interests within the state, building supply companies, timber products industries. And so they make adjustments based on a political process. Whereas wildfire prepared home is based on science-based research and some judgment calls, of course, as well. But they're certainly much more rigorous, but there's significant overlap.
Can I clarify a little bit?
Please.
So I think the thing about the Southern Ren evaluation, it doesn't uncouple the ember thing from the fire, from the radiant heat thing, or the flame contact thing. So you're going to get a report from them that said, do this, do this. It doesn't tell you why you're doing it. So the thing about wildfire home, it's very clear that the base is for ember ignition resistance. And then the plus is all about radiant heat or flame contact that might happen. So flame contact is the thing you want to avoid at all costs. So radiant heat, let's say. So I think they ask similar things, or they point out similar things, but they don't really group them in a way that tells you why you're doing them.
It also seems rather less strict.
Well, because there's no stick to the Southern Marin evaluation. You know, because since you already live someplace, a building code doesn't apply to you unless you maybe do a big remodel and then it might. But there's nothing that makes you. So here,
Things listed as required weren't really.
well, there is, if it's vegetation related, there is maybe a requirement there because of the way the law is written. But from your home perspective, there's no stick there. But here, there's get your insurance, and that's kind of a stick. So, but I think that the thing that is sort of missing from that evaluation is why you're doing it. And here, it's pretty clear why you're doing it. They're requiring this. These are things that could be required, but they're not required yet. And they're all about radiant heat or flame.
Well, it looks as though I'm halfway. So it's not like it's a waste of effort.
Definitely not.
Never not a waste of effort.
Definitely not.
Yeah, and Steve, would you recommend to this gentleman that after he does the work, that he report it to the Southern Rim Fire District so that they'll send you another?
They come around and inspect it.
Yeah, okay.
And they've
Yeah, if you want them to come sooner, raise your hand and they'll come sooner. But otherwise, they're gonna come on their own.
So anybody here on the fair plan? Okay, very sorry. Slight good news, right? Is the State Department of Insurance has what they call a safer from wildfires framework, and What this slide is intending to do is compare wildfire prepared home with what the insurance commissioner requires carriers, insurers to offer premium discounts for. And the FAIR plan is the one that offers the most discount, up to 14.5% off just for doing, you know, some of these things. Each one gives you a little bit of credit. It's, you know, the rest of the insurers, they would say, yeah, we'll give you a discount. It's $27 a year. And so it's not really going to pay for it. But if you're paying $5,000 a year and you get a 15% discount, we're starting to help a little bit, right? So over time though, the fact is rates are going to start to increase, and these premium discounts will start to, you know, provide a little bit of an economic return on investment over the, you know, 5 to 7 years or so. Okay. We're into extra innings over here. Thank you. But I'd love to use some more time for questions.
There are questions now for either speaker.
I don't want to ask all the questions.
No, go ahead.
Yes.
Are the materials from your slide that be made available? There's so much information in this that I would like to have it written down so I can look at it.
Of course, I'm happy to make them available, and I think that was part of the bargain.
Yeah,
here.
so they'll be posted somewhere.
Yeah.
And this is being recorded. You can listen to it again. You have a
I had a question for, I think it'd be probably for
Kelby?
Kelby back there. Kelby, can you comment sort of in the worst case scenario, whether a lender is gonna be able to force place insurance? You know, like your mortgage company would force place insurance if you can't get it and then charge you. Is that still happening? Do you know?
Can, but the ability for mortgage lenders to do that is dwindling. In other words, their access to the blanket protection that they historically were able to get through force-placed insurance programs is
Not available.
shrinking with regard to the wildfire risk. So in other words, it's not as easy for them to put that in place as it used to be. And of course, they're only really focused on ensuring their interest in the home and not all of yours. So, you know, the level of
Right.
protection compared to your traditional homeowners policy is a lot less.
And I doubt they're interested in price shopping. Thank you.
I know the thing, you know, strictly respect the red boxes, is that something that you have to do or is more important than the others? Just if you could define that.
Sure. So this chart's an eyesore, and it's not designed to be read in the back, only afterwards. So wildfire prepared says you have to do all of these things to get to the base level. And the Safer from Wildfires, which is what the insurance commissioner came out with, mandates that insurers consider any of these things and give you a slight discount. The way that insurers are starting to kind of bridge the two is they'll say, great, we'll give you like 0.1% discount for each thing. And then if you do all of them, you get a 6% discount. So they're trying to do this. The stricter spec shows that this is a little bit more challenging on the left side compared to the insurance one. But there's a couple of key differences where wildfire prepared home at the base level does not require that you enclose your eaves. And that's a really expensive thing.
Yeah.
And if the insurers are going to hold back 6%, 10% of the bonus, only if you get the enclosed eaves over here, you're going to expend quite a bit more money. And then they don't allow any combustible structures, sheds, or other outbuildings within 30 feet. Wildfire prepared home base allows for up to 3. So if you have a detached garage or an ADU or sheds or anything like that, you can't have any of them. And the insurer might say, you don't get your bonus completion as a result. Yeah.
Since we're encouraging homeowners to clean up green waste around, and I know we have 4 pickups every year through the Eagle Valley garbage. And the 4 it could be green or it could be other garbage, but is there a way to get more green can pickups to encourage homeowners to do, maybe monthly cleanups instead of just 4 times a year.
We can, you ask for a group of people.
Yeah, I know that. That takes a little more effort in finding the spot and all that. I know that. But I'm just thinking, just your everyday person, could we just have a little bit more, maybe one or two extra more ingredients?
I think that a conversation you probably have to have with Homestead Valley Sanitary District. They're the ones that contract with Mill Valley Refuse. And we live by the conditions of that contract, which gives us those 4 general trash pickups. If we want more, it's gonna cost us more, but they can negotiate that with Mill Valley Refuse.
So I got a second one to keep moving stuff off the property. So I should report to you, Steve, that, what it's costing me.
Yeah,
And the more that,
Yeah, and basically, my insurance company did, they had a drone go over it. I did less moss on the roof on the north side, and trees, and, so I'll let Steve know the cost that the trees were cut down, and, my neighbors got upset seeing me working on the roof, but all the moss is gone. And I'm back up with pictures, and, they said, okay, we'll take your money.
very generous of them.
Yeah.
let your neighbors know that it is important for us, the Firewise community, for all of us to report our expenses in doing these various projects. So that we can get credit for having done that work for our Firewise certification.
I have a leaf blower, but I can't stand the noise. I found it's very calming to just rake leaves.
Yeah.
I feel like a monk in Kyoto, so, but then you need lots of space to put the leaves in.
But back to Steve's point, in terms of vegetation management, the debris box program is available, and it's free to us as homeowners. It just takes, as Terry said, a little extra effort to coordinate 2 or 3 or 4 adjacent or reasonably close neighbors to participate, and we'll get a debris box there for you, 10-yard or 20-yard. If you can fill a 20-yard, we'll get you a 20-yard box. And Maribeth is the one generally that manages that program. The other thing that's available is there are 2 times a year, Fire Safe Marin, or 4 times. You can, the chipper program. There are 2 different chipper programs that you can take advantage of. One is with the countywide
Random Wildfire Prevention Authority.
Thank you. And they have some chipper days on the calendar for our area. You can just type in your address and see when the next chipper day is coming, and just pile it up out on the street, and it'll get picked up and chipped. The alternative is Sutherland Fire District also has funding through Measure Q, that 2 or 3 neighbors, adjacent neighbors, just make a pile out there, give them a call, and they'll come and pick it up within a couple of days. Or not pick it up, they'll come and chip it within a couple of days. We're talking about, the mass bulky stuff. Woody stuff, yeah. Not bamboo, not, what's that stuff? Scotch broom, let's see what else?
Blackberry?
Probably not yet, not blackberry, all that
But that's
fibrous.
Yeah.
But it's there. We can use that. We've had less demand for the debris box program recently. We need to pick it up. Maybe it's because all of your yards are getting more under control. I don't know. It's amazing how much more open the valley looks. I mean, you see structures around this valley now that I've been in the valley for 30 years, and there are buildings, there are homes around the valley that I'd never seen, and they've suddenly become available. We have 2 incredible gentlemen here that can answer questions.
Any more questions?
Yeah. We don't have anything coming in online, right?
Oh, I asked if, were there any questions from the Zoom participants?
Okay.
All right,
Well, I'll ask.
go for it, man.
Tired of me.
No.
I have another question for Kelby in terms of, um, trying to get an underwriter, to understand the lack of internal logic of suggesting that your flat roof is deteriorated and needs to be corrected in some unknown manner. Um, so it doesn't pool. Well, it's a flat roof, they pool, doesn't mean it's gonna leak. Um, how do you have any suggestions as how to politely show the lack of internal logic when there's no connection between interior water damage claims and cooling on a roof if the roof's not leaking? Is that clear? Like,
Well,
there's no logical relationship between pooling on a roof and the risk.
right, well, that's the thing, I would encourage you to put the monkey on the insurer's back to demonstrate what is their risk for your particular roof condition. And in many cases, it's very easy to refute what they come back with by simply, contacting a roofing contractor. Say, well, your roof is in good condition or in adequate condition for X number of years. I mean, the whole point is they're usually reacting to a condition that is more hypothesis than fact. Because that's what they can see from a drone or from aerial imaging.
And they're not just deciding, oh, okay, we're not profitable in California, so let's upgrade the risk of all our homes and put on a new roof so we don't have to even worry about whether we have water damage claim.
Well, but see, they're not gonna pay your water damage claims if you just have a leaky roof.
Right.
You've got to have a covered cause of loss that's going to damage that roof and then cause it to leak. So that's the whole point. There is not a causal connection in most cases. So put the monkey on their back to say, what risk is it that you think my roof is causing you?
That will result in a covered direct physical loss.
Yeah. And that's basically it. Now, again, I've had experience with a number of neighbors that have similar situations. You get a roofing contractor to say, well, yeah, okay, you have a problem here, we'll fix that. My view was, I don't think you needed to do that because the insurer is not going to pay for the loss that would have caused. So it's, again, go back to them and say, what is it you're going to pay for that you're worried about here? And if they can't tell you what that is, they can't show the causal connection. What's the basis for their non-renewal?
Okay, and is that something the California Department of Insurance is going to say you cannot renew, you cannot not non-renew this person?
Yeah, they will push back in that respect. As long as they do not have a valid basis that reflects their risk for the condition of your property, it's not a valid means for non-renewing you. And so the insurance department will push back on your behalf. I'm not saying that, I'm not guaranteeing the CDI will ever.
I understand, but how, I mean, all right.
The point is make them prove it.
I understand.
Don't
Question for
be a
Ivan,
victim.
maybe for Ivan. I had a question put to me today. Have you heard, or do local building or planning departments for probably new construction or significant new development require a vegetation management plan? Yeah.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
7A requires that. For new, 7A requires a vegetation plan.
Okay.
Especially if we're talking about a planned community rather than,
Well,
that's actually true. Even for brand new construction and single home on a single lot.
But 7A only applies to new construction, so.
and what is the extent of a vegetation management plan for a single?
Where will the plants be? What plant is gonna be there?
So,
How much separation between them and maturity?
so for instance, if we're doing a major meadow restoration.
For example.
For example, we need to develop a vegetation management plan for the Homestead Valley Community Center.
Well, so, but that's tied to a new home. That's not. I don't know. I think.
This is a park.
Huh?
This is a park.
So I don't know about that.
New homes do require a vegetation management plan.
But this isn't a new home.
Right, exactly. I got it. I'll give them the answer. They won't like it.
Well, the county may. require something, but.
Yeah.
7A doesn't require something
For the center,
for the center.
right? Okay. 8:35.
Yes.
I don't know how to answer this question or how relevant it is, but we have a lot of history in Homestead Valley. And there's some very old trees back in Stolte Grove, and they have evidence of having been burned. Maybe 200 years ago, 300 years ago, or something like that. I think that the history of fire is very interesting. You talked, I think, about you talked maybe about Santa Rosa, which had fire in 2 or 3 places. Do people take that into consideration? It seems to me you could look and see what Homestead did 200 years ago, 300 years before people lived here, but there were fires. And the scars remain on those trees, and you can see what they were.
So,
Is that?
so that state has maps of fire hazard severity zones. We are in the zone, and there's a particular entity within CAL FIRE that does this on a regular basis. And one thing to consider is fire history in the area. So yeah, they do look at it.
There is you can get, online, you can look up a map of your particular area that shows you the fire history. And it's extremely interesting.
Yeah, I think it should be.
We are at 8:35, so we're.
There probably is some coffee. I heard it percolating back there. There are definitely some cookies.
Jim, is it over?